Hi everyone and welcome along to another episode of the LOPSided Podcast. Today I'm joined by Amanda Chaboryk. Amanda, how are you doing?
I'm good. Great to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you. So, what I usually try to do at the start of these is firstly, tell me a little bit about yourself, and then I have these three strange questions I ask people. But yeah, first let's start with you. You've got a very diverse skill set, haven't you? From legal tech to data, AI, and then randomly LPM, litigation funding, legal expense insurance. You're a bit of a Swiss Army knife of legal ops, aren't you?
I think you pull quite a few strings and you find they intertwine.
It's very true. Very true. So, okay, a bit about you first before we get into the subject, which is around AI or leveraging Gen AI in legal service delivery. Who's your hero?
My hero. If I Do you mean like family or could it be absolutely anyone?
Absolutely anyone. Can be anybody.
Probably my mom.
I've met your mum. She is a legend. She's an absolute legend. So I completely see that one.
Yeah, I'd say for being very resilient and also still finding time to be a full-time professional woman and full-time mom, being able to do both of those jobs.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. And what is your biggest accomplishment?
I still feel like I have quite a few things on my list, but I would say moving and starting an entire new life in the UK from Canada.
Okay.
It's a bit of a test of resilience, different education system, well, also a different legal system, having to start fresh in a new country.
Yeah. And how long have you been in the UK?
I've been here for, oh wow, time flies, just over 10 years now, 11 years. I came to read law at the University of Exeter and I immediately loved it and knew I wanted to stay for good.
Amazing. And the most important question of all, which song would you sing on a team karaoke night out?
That's Gangster's Paradise by Coolio.
Because you really like your rap music, don't you? We used to, geek out on rap music quite a bit.
Yes, exactly. So many quotes on business that come from rap music.
So I mentioned we're here to speak about AI legal service delivery. So to start with, first question I had for you: what do you see as the emerging trends in Gen AI, and which of those could have a major impact in the legal sector over the next 5 or 10 years?
I think where we are now is we're well past the hype stage when people started interacting with GPT saying, oh, this is amazing. This can summarize information. This can extract so many data points. This is a super intelligent machine. I think we're past that stage. And now what is happening is people are starting to identify specific use cases for specific legal workflows, whether it is contract review or even doing a first draft of a contract, say an NDA. I think an emerging trend is use cases going from conceptual to actual. People really doing that user acceptance testing and starting to also fine tune specific workflows. So, what that means is training a task to be specific at a particular task. So, let's say you want to go through 40 let's say you want to go through 40 contracts and let's say they're leases and you want to say what are the heads of term, what are the expiry date, what are the lease expiry dates, are there restrictive covenants, is there insurance, training a model to be very effective at a specific task.
Okay. So in terms of the emerging trends that will have the biggest impact, so you think it's around like document review, contract review?
I think contract review, the commercial and corporate contracts are always going to have a very vital role in legal. I think AI has already been in disputes and made waves over the past few years, especially how you and I have witnessed, whether it's in e-discovery and outcome prediction. But in terms of use cases that I think are very tangible and impact almost every in-house legal team is the corporate and commercial contract review.
Yeah, that's kind of the low-hanging fruit, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd say it's the greatest applicability to all teams, and then different teams, whether it's say employment, litigation, or M&A will also find their own specific use cases. I think it's specific per organization, or whichever organization. If the focus is litigation, more litigation use cases might be found, such as drafting a Part 36 offer, or looking at the historical precedent guidance on, let's say, freezing injunction, and then training a model to do a first draft based on the historical data.
Okay, so you're envisaging first draft, kind of first draft of important kind of key case documents will be expedited through Gen AI, in the sense that you'll no longer be looking at it from scratch. You'll be just taking a first draft that a computer would do, as opposed to say a junior associate would do, and then kind of working on that basis.
Yeah, I'd say super helping with creating a tangible first draft, as well as that review part. So as GenAI is very effective at anomaly detection, to notice, for example, if there's a full stop in the wrong place, or making sure the correct names are on there, and that just going through that almost checklist of is the spelling and punctuation good? Is everything, is this included? Or let's say if it is let's say it's a application, or let's say it is a due diligence report for an M&A, is every single section included? And being able to look at, say, a precedent and flag if there's any deviations or if anything is missing.
Okay, and what do you see as the main challenges or limitations in implementing Gen AI in legal services today? So, accuracy, transparency, trust.
I think those are all challenges, as well as user acceptance testing.
Right.
So when I say UAT, I mean when you first start interacting with models, what is well known is hallucinations.
Mm-hmm.
So I always joke and say it's not magic, it's maths, how
Yep.
the technology works on predicting the next word. I think it's really important for people to understand how the technology works, and how generative AI is different from traditional AI. Traditional AI was conventionally task-based, a code of instructions to do something, say, uh, extract X from a receipt, or let's look at this policy document and get the dates. Whereas generative AI is significantly more advanced. It's based on a lot more training of data, and it also uses the transformer architecture, which is very advanced. And you can tell how advanced it is, especially with these models, where you can keep asking questions and it will constantly reply, as opposed to code to do a specific set of instructions.
Refines it, doesn't it? Yeah.
With limited deviations. The other challenge is the evolving regulatory framework.
Mm-hmm.
So, especially with the EU AI Act, and having to comply with the AI regulations within different jurisdictions, and also data transfer, data privacy, of course, and then all the new and evolving. I say evolving because the models have massively evolved even in the last few months, but the evolving technologies, and how that the regulation will struggle to keep up.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there is such a kind of incessant focus on Gen AI, but there are these. You touched on hallucinations, and I think there's been some examples in the press of lawyers who have probably lent too firmly on Gen AI within their legal work, which has resulted in, I think, hallucinations coming through as precedents. And then even to the strawberry conundrum. I don't know if you know about this, but if you ask ChatGPT how many R's are in strawberry, it will tell you two, even though there's actually three. So there's these little like weird conundrums in it, which I think from a point of view of an industry like law, where everything needs to be so comprehensive, I think they do sow seeds of doubt in it's not always going to be right.
Oh no, exactly, and that's why I always say trust but verify. So even when you're completing a piece of work, or let's say you're drafting a statement of case, the importance of verifying all outputs. Check, like when, for example, when I did my qualifying work experience, before I did any work, I'd print it and review it on paper, because something about when you print it out as opposed to staring at a screen, looking at it with a fresh set of eyes. But I'd apply the same to GenAI outputs. And when you're working with a model, look up, well, what is the data trained on? Where did it come from? Do we know, is it on the cloud? Where is it being hosted? If you're working with a new technology vendor that uses GenAI, well, which models do you use? When was the model last updated? Because, for example, if you are, or let's say within litigation finance, if a model had a cutoff time of 2023, and if we were looking up the Packard judgment,
Mm-hmm.
if that model wasn't yet up to date, that very important case would be missing, which has huge ramifications for the industry.
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. It's a really good point. And I think you've touched on this a little bit here, but what do you see as safeguards that are necessary to prevent misuse of AI generated content in legal documents? It's especially, and we've touched on this in terms of accuracy and responsibility.
So I think it's really important to have firm-wide policies,
Hmm.
have transparency on the models, what they have been trained on as much as possible, which models are being used, as well as if you're going to be using a model, make sure it's been verified, confirm it's been verified, disclose if you're working for a particular client if you are using AI.
Hmm.
I also think that in terms of looking at the existing frameworks like the National Institute of Standard and Technologies, looking at best practice from the market on AI safety and complying with the relevant AI safety frameworks, as well as staying abreast of the regulatory updates. So if the CMA produces guidance on using large language models, to make sure that practices follow the guidance as much as possible.
And these AI regulations and policies are popping up everywhere now, aren't they? I mean, I've seen, ABA, the American Bar Association, and in Australia, we've seen quite a few over there that are popping up and being refined. The EU AI Act you mentioned. There's a lot of interest, isn't there? A lot of focus on this at the moment.
The reason there's so much focus is because the technology is so groundbreaking. If you wanted to, you can have a conversation with a model for an hour, and it's completely coherent. I think that the other reason it's receiving a lot of attention is the accessibility.
Hmm.
So anyone can open up an account to one of these models and start interacting with the model and have an output. Whereas with other kind of traditional forms of AI, let's say natural language processing or the use of or targeted assisted review in e-discovery, it's not something you can just download and start using.
Yeah,
It's the accessibility of the technology and instant results.
yeah. No, it's so true when you think about it like that. Yeah, like everybody has access at their fingertips to AI, don't they? So it's really become this kind of war of attrition in a way of like knowledge and access to knowledge and creation of content through various, Gen AI platforms, tools, products. You see them everywhere, don't you? Like everybody putting their own spin on some kind of Gen AI infused product that they have. It might be to present presentations. It might be, to present a particular type of content. It is a fascinating area and just moving at such pace, isn't it?
It's because I think what organizations can do is they can connect, they can add a layer of Gen AI, one of the models or a combination of the models, and that will allow you to ask questions in natural language of large data sets. I think the organizations or the tech providers that will be most sophisticated are the ones that have clean and structured data and that have been collecting and structuring data for years.
You and I have been data geeks for years, haven't we? We've always geeked out on the importance of structured data and how that can support businesses and data informed decision making.
Exactly. So IA before AI, information architecture enables artificial intelligence.
It's funny you say that because Alex Smith on the previous episode said the exact same thing. He's obviously one of the leaders in this space, and yeah, that's become something of I think a key quote for people in this space.
I think people can sometimes underestimate the importance of clean, up-to-date, structured data sets and data integrity. If you look at the process it takes, let's say, even a simple example is, let's say we are organizing a lunch. We want to have 150 people attend. We want to put the organization, the dietary requirements. If we don't have a set taxonomy of the attendees, what organization, let's say we wanted to say how many law firms, how many tech companies, how many male, how many female, what are the dietary requirements, where are people traveling from, because that can account for some people are going to be late. If you didn't have that data set structured, you wouldn't be able to get insights from it.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And what role do you think Gen AI could play in standardization of legal processes across jurisdictions, or in complex multinational legal matters? Because we see a lot around the commoditized aspects, doc review, the due diligence piece, and whatnot. But what about in that more cross jurisdictional, complex space, complex legal matters space?
In terms of structuring unstructured data, GenAI is a lot of e-discovery providers are using it to even supercharge and have that additional layer. So basically combining various forms of AI. GenAI is very effective at anomaly detection.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in due course, once the data is clean, structured, and the data sets are available, and issues like web scraping and IP are dealt with, that I do think, like the likes of Lex Machina, I do think outcome prediction,
Okay,
or not
yeah.
just outcome prediction, being able to look at, say, key characteristics of successful cases. Because GenAI is very good at finding nuances and new information, I think that in due course it will be able to assist in, I don't want to say outcome prediction, but looking at characteristics of successful claims.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating when you think about it like that. It's just, I suppose, how it gets access to that data, right? But imagine a world where you could kind of, tap into a Gen AI or an LLM and say, I have this, high court litigation warranty claim based on X, Y, and Z. I think the merits are strong on this matter. How does this compare to broader matters historically in the UK High Court? And, have something back saying historically there have been X amount. They generally, claimants are successful in this many cases, and maybe even delving a little bit down into the deeper data underpinning that.
So if an organization had their data structured, and let's say they collected the data points from those cases, they would be in a better position to do that kind of inquiry and that analysis than an organization that wouldn't have that data set structured and cleaned.
Yeah, because ultimately, I suppose if we're talking about directly for a law firm, and the law firm having that data and having that data structured, it's just kind of the interface, isn't it, really, then? I mean, it's just going into that data set and being able to extrapolate based on their own data, what predictability around what an outcome might look like, which would be super powerful,
Yeah,
wouldn't it?
super powerful. And I think this is why knowledge teams are going to have a huge task in helping support that process of cleaning, structuring the data. Not just that, keeping the knowledge information up to date. The most recent cases, I guess, a data privacy team or an IP team will have even more of an urgency in amalgamating and turning the complex AI and data and accompanying data privacy regulation into digestible terms for all users. That will go to the risk team, the technology, the IT team, to help monitor and ensure the use of the emerging technologies are being used in the right ways.
Interesting. Okay, so final question on this. So, as we mentioned earlier, so you've worked in Gen AI, done a lot around data, legal tech, legal project management, litigation funding, and you've worked inside at a funder, haven't you? And legal expense insurance. Which of those do you find the most interesting?
I think within all of those, they at the end of the day, what's most important in legal project management is data to information, communicating to the client how whether it's their case or their deal is progressing. What I enjoy the most is turning data to information and information to knowledge, and I think that's applicable within all those areas. in litigation finance, when you are bringing a case to the investment committee to determine if it is a tangible investment or if it's a meritorious claim, you need to look at the data. What are the prospects of success, the draft precedent H, the pathway to recovery, and then turning that into information, whether it's an investment committee report or basically amalgamating all the findings to make a decision whether it will be also appealing to an AT insurer. And the same for legal technology when you're doing a proof of concept or when you are determining whether a piece of technology is going to be useful to the piece of for that particular deal or claim, or for the practice for the entire firm. You need to do the user acceptance testing. You have to look at the data. You have to look at the pilot. What has been the adoption? What has been the experience of the users? And then you ultimately turn that to make a recommendation whether the technology will be invested. So I'd say a kind of spin on the question, but I think what's I like most about all those is turning the data to information and the information to knowledge.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it's fascinating hearing you talk about it, because you can clearly see the kind of the way you've created synergies within each of the component parts in your skill set. But look, that's been super insightful. Amanda Chaboryk, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so Amanda, the next part we always do on this podcast is a kind of demystifying or a a fact or fiction type piece where we take some commonly used statements, phrases, things that you find in in the corridors or you hear at conferences, and we try to get our experts' view on them, if they're factual or if they're in fact rubbish. So to stay as technical as the things we're discussing, I've got this high tech bullshit button I wanted to give you.
I love that.
So if in fact you don't agree with the statement, just press the button and tell me why. If you do, then again, it will be good to hear your views on why you think the statement's factual. Okay, so to get straight into it, the first statement I have for you: law firm leaders are generally aware of how much Gen AI will impact their firms.
I think that if they are not yet aware, they're going to be aware very soon, because clients are going to have the expectation that they use AI in some process within the legal delivery, especially if it's been established, the efficiency gains it has and the cost savings.
Okay. Okay, so you agree with that as a statement?
I agree with it to the extent it's eventually going to happen. It's a matter of when, not if.
That's such a contentious lawyer response. Okay. Second statement: law firms are fully aware of the capabilities available to them and how to leverage it within their service.
Do we mean the full capabilities?
I think the full capabilities in terms of Gen AI and how they can leverage those capabilities within the service they're providing to clients.
I think the discovery phase is going to be continuous and ongoing. I don't think anyone yet has grasped the full capability of the power, and especially found the capabilities that are possible with vector databases and retrieval augmented generation. So
Okay.
being able to really supercharge workflows and use advanced data science methods to legal data sets.
So you see it more as that they're aware of what's available to them. It's just obviously implementing that as part of their operating model is the difficult part.
Yeah, I'd say the conceptual to the actual.
Yeah.
And being able to, there's one thing achieving something, but being able to have that process implemented and used on a wide scale, and then going through processes such as technology risk, and then looking at, are we able to use this data set? For example, the ICO recently did a consultation on web scraping, but before any of these super powerful processes are used or workflows are used, there is quite a journey in terms of regulatory
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? From a law firm perspective, I think it is that regulatory space, and it's ensuring compliance. There's the ethics side of it. There's professional obligations, and I think there's risk, there's liability. I think a big thing that probably hasn't got as much attention as it should have is law firms have their professional indemnity insurance that covers the negligence of potential negligence of lawyers in terms of providing legal service. But do those policies cover negligence caused by a lawyer depending or being reliant on artificial intelligence? Would they get to a position where they maybe try to put in a claim against their professional indemnity policy, and an insurer comes back and says, "Well, no, you're not covered for this. You're covered for the negligence of a lawyer, but not." Does that constitute negligence of a lawyer in terms of trying to use AI? Is that does it need to be kind of thrashed out as a separate part of the policy? I think that in itself, without going down a rabbit hole, we can on this it is a separate thing maybe, but yeah, just interesting. So the final
That
question.
sort of
Oh, sorry.
relates, sorry, that just reminds me of almost like cyber insurance, like when organizations need to make sure that everyone is cognizant of the cyber rules using VPN. But I think cyber insurance became increasingly prevalent. I don't know if there's some synergies between,
Yeah, yeah,
because so much goes down to like human agency. Like if someone gets a call and they leave their laptop unattended, but so many of these processes just, it's not even um, a complex ransomware. Some of these incidents that had the largest ramifications are sometimes just unfortunately down to human error.
yeah. I mean, I suppose the way I was looking at it is through the lens of I mentioned earlier there was a case in New York where the lawyers, I believe, took presented their case, and they had used Gen AI to build
Oh,
their
the
legal argument.
hallucinated
Yeah,
cases.
and
But
they'd hallucinated precedents. So does in that case that's obviously professional negligence, right? Now, does an insurer say, well, that's is that directly professional negligence, or is it something slightly different?
I would say that goes down to preparation.
Yeah,
Goes that
okay.
in that concept of trust but verify. If the outputs were verified, and being completely aware that if you're going to be presenting something to a court, to make sure you verified that case. Is this an actual case? It takes sometimes minutes, if not seconds, to go and look on a legal knowledge database and confirm if that is a real case. I know under pressurized conditions, things can be a bit different, but I think it all goes down to verifying outputs, just how you would, for example, verify, check a piece of work, or just read over, let's say, submissions before you're
Yeah,
entering court.
yeah. No, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. So the final question, the classic question that we hear everywhere: will AI really replace lawyers?
Oh, wow.
There you go. You
That's
got to press
great.
it.
That's great. Okay. So I think that within, I hear that quite often. And I also know there's also this kind of anxiety about certain workflows being completely relied upon by AI. But I think the advocacy, reading a room, leveraging experience, having that mental data set. Oh, I've been through this many negotiations, or I've been through this many hearings, trials, and mediations. That experience, reading the room, being able to do the scenarios, X, Y, Z can happen from this, and that deep, almost decision tree logic, almost like AI random forest models, but that leveraging that experience, the tangible skill sets of knowledge, analysis, and context. I think AI will supercharge workflows, especially by people who have a deep knowledge of how to use it, but I do not believe it will replace, especially the role of when lawyers and regulators work together, and when governments are looking to implement policies, and the lawyers are leveraging their experience and their knowledge of why context is so important. I don't believe that that will be replaced by AI anytime soon.
It's a really good point. I've heard it referred to, and I like the terminology of the human premium. I think that works, and that it really is, and the human plus AI piece, isn't it? AI is supercharging kind of, could say some of the commoditized, content generation aspects, but I suppose ultimately, it's in the name, isn't it? Artificial intelligence, and we're trying to train these to, you know, I don't want to say have the intelligence of a human, because some of them are surpassing it in some areas, but it's really about how you leverage that capability alongside the expertise that you're bringing to a client. And I think, people buy people, right? I don't think anybody's ever going to be particularly, you know keen or comfortable, on something they can't see or, physically touch,
Like tangible.
like something tangible.
It's like why some people prefer to read a book than
Exactly. It's a really good example. Yeah, it's that kind
and
of
then
thing.
AI, if you want to argue empathetic leadership, leaders building teams,
Yeah.
being inclusive, have like leading a team, knowing what someone's strengths are, where someone could benefit from support. A machine can't do that. A machine can't be an empathetic leader.
It's interesting. I was reading an article about, I think it might be Poland, but one of the Eastern European countries, a business was the first to implement an AI CEO. So it's literally, and I was like, how does this work in practice?
I want to see their data sets.
Yeah, I mean, but how does that work in practice? To your point, empathy, and everything becomes binary. Oh, you've not reached this, and this.
And the binary bit is what's very important. And I think sometimes with the outputs of these models and why they're hallucinations, that all goes down to the training. That's why what I say prompt engineering or prompt writing is so important, because when you're instructing a model, you have to provide the vital context that might not be within the confines of the training data.
Yeah.
So that model that is making those decisions, I guess what's extremely important is when that AI CEO, when they're making decisions, do they have all the information? Has the model been trained on all that information? Or is when this AI CEO is making important decisions, is the context provided by people who are supporting the model?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think a lot of it does come back to data, doesn't it? And one thing that I read years ago, a really well-known guy, Trevor Fure, who wrote the Smarter Legal Model, a quote in there that I think still stands strong. I think he said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And if you can't manage it, you can't measure it. And it's just so true, isn't it?
It's actually, I think at Virgin Active, just the one over there, I remember it said on the scale, if you're not assessing, you're guessing. And I think that's completely true.
That's totally.
Might
Who knew Virgin Active would have the answer?
It might be an odd synergy, but I think that's very true. How can you assess something that isn't being measured?
A great note to end on. Again, Amanda, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for watching the LOPSided Podcast with me, John O'Donoghue. Don't forget to follow us on TikTok, Instagram and LinkedIn at the LOPSided Podcast. Check out our website at www.thelopsidedpodcast.com, and most importantly, like us and subscribe to us here on YouTube.